favorite scary movie.
Well, sometimes that is better.
I am the devil, and I am here to do the devil's work.
Demons to some, angels to others.
Do you want to play a game?
Here's Johnny!
The funeral is about to begin.
Never sleep again.
Alrighty, Elmers, welcome back to another episode of 13th Elm. Here with Rob and Bill. Say what up.
What up? What's up?
Alrighty, let's jump into the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, 1920 German masterpiece. This is a film. Obviously, it's over 100 years old. It's very popular. It's influential. It's been studied and dissected and written about and reported and discussed to death.
Ad nauseum.
And we're going to do more of that for you guys tonight. So the film stars Werner Krauss as Dr. Caligari, Conrad Veidt as Cesare, Friedrich Fehr as Francis, Lil Dagover as Jan, Hans-Heinz V. Travdowski as Alan, and Rudolf Lettinger as Dr. Olsen. Written by Hans Janowitz and Karl Mayer. Janowitz served as an officer during World War I, but the experience left him embittered with the military, which affected his writing. Mayer feigned madness to avoid military service during the war, which led him to intense examinations from the military psychiatrist. Both were self-proclaimed pacifists at the time of their meeting following the war and remained as such until their respective deaths. We'll get into that in a little bit more detail as it becomes relevant to some of the film's story and plot, but let's get that plot out of the way and we'll open this up for some discussion. I know that both of you are really looking forward to that. So, right away, bam, opening up frame device. A frame device is kind of like a story within a story or bookending the plot with some outer commentary. Think of The Notebook or The Princess Bride. Would be two examples. Anyway, so frame begins with Francis sitting on a bench talking to an older man who complains that the spirits have driven him away from his family and home. A dazed woman named Jane passes them. Francis quickly explains that she is his fiancée and they have suffered a great ordeal. Most of the rest of the film is presented in the flashback form of Francis's story, which takes place in Holstenwall, a shadowy village in Germany. Francis and his friend Alan are competing for Jane's affection and plan to visit the local town fair. Meanwhile, a mysterious man named Dr. Caligari seeks a permit from the rude town clerk to present a spectacle at the fair, which features a somnambulist named Cesare. The clerk mocks and berates Caligari, but ultimately approves the permit, and later that night, the clerk is found stabbed to death in his bed. The next morning, Francis and Alan visit Caligari's spectacle, where he opens a coffin-like box to reveal the sleeping Cesare. On Caligari's order, Cesare opens and answers questions from the audience. Despite Francis's protest, Alan asks, "How long shall I live?" To Alan's horror, Cesare answers, "Until tomorrow's dawn." Later that night, a figure breaks into Alan's home and stabs him to death in his bed. Francis investigates Alan's murder with the help of Jan and her father, Dr. Olsen, who obtains police authorization to investigate the somnambulist. That night, the police apprehend a criminal in possession of a knife who was caught attempting to murder an elderly woman. When questioned by Francis and Dr. Olsen, the criminal confesses that he did in fact try to kill the elderly woman, but denies in any part of an involvement with the two previous deaths, stating he was merely taking advantage of the situation to try to divert blame away from himself. At night, Francis spies on Caligari and observes Cesare sleeping in the cabinet of their home. However, the real Cesare is sneaking into Jane's home as she sleeps, raises a knife to stab her, but instead abducts her, dragging her through the window onto the street. He is chased by an angry mob. Cesare eventually drops Jan and flees. Soon after, he falls off a cliff, collapses, and dies. Francis confirms that the criminal who confessed to the elderly's murder has been locked away and could not have been Jane's attacker. Francis and the police investigate Caligari's sideshow and realize that Cesare is sleeping in a box. However, it is a life-size replica doll. Caligari escapes in the confusion. Francis follows and sees Caligari through the entrance of an insane asylum. Francis, frantically searching, begins to ask the employees if Dr. Caligari is an inmate. He is told that he should speak to the director of the asylum, but is shocked to learn that Caligari is indeed the asylum's director. With help from the asylum staff, Francis studies the director's records in the diary while the director is sleeping. The writings reveal his obsession with the story of a 17th century monk named Caligari, who used a somnambulist named Cesare to commit murders in northern Italian towns. The director, attempting to understand the earlier Caligari, experiments with a somnambulist admitted to the asylum, who becomes Cesare. The asylum director screams, "I must become Caligari." Francis and the doctors call the police to Caligari's office, where they show him the dead corpse of Cesare. Caligari then attacks one of the staff, is subdued, restrained in a straitjacket, and becomes an inmate in his own asylum. The narrative returns to the present. Francis concludes the story with a twist ending. Again, possibly the first twist ending in the history of cinema, which is of note, and many of the things in this film will be possible first in film history, being that it is 1920. But certainly the first one that I'm aware of. Francis and the unarmed man walk back to the main doors of the same asylum, where they see Jane and Cesare, both in the asylum, seemingly as patients. Francis tells the unarmed man that he must not ask Cesare to tell him his fortune, or he will also die. Spotting Jane, asks her to marry him, which she replies, "We who are noble blood may not follow the wishes of our hearts." The man Francis refers to as Dr. Caligari then appears, however now appearing to be more clean and pragmatic, not the devious vilified personification in the flashback. He is indeed the asylum director. Francis attacks him and begins to scream, "He is Caligari, he is Caligari," and then is restrained in a straitjacket, placed in the same cell as Caligari was previously in the story, and the same asylum director now announces he finally understands Francis's delusion, and he believes that the director is Dr. Caligari, and now knowing that, he can cure him. So, what do you guys think of this?
I would like to just go ahead and just get ahead of the rumor mill on this. I know Twitter's going to be a buzzing, YouTube's going to be a buzzing, that I watched the version that is completely untouched as whatever it looks like the original film was dug up and shown. So unfortunately, there was a lot of things in here that I missed because of things like not being able to tell the characters apart, being able to follow the plot, and all that fun stuff that helps you enjoy a movie. But still, I knew a lot about this beforehand, and it has been one that I wanted to watch. But yeah, like a lot of it was lost on me because I just missed it. What did you think?
Full disclosure, I fell asleep during this film. I'm not trying to be funny. I was actually very tired. I think it would have happened no matter what film we were watching. I was losing sleep, and I ended up having to do other things that day. I got home pretty late and started the film. And it's a silent film. I mean, there's a good score to it. But in the third act, I did actually fall asleep on the couch. So I had to finish the film today. This is an odd pick, not because you picked an odd movie, just I have a problem scoring this film, and I'm not going to score it right now because we'll do that at the end. But I'm not a cinephile. I've never taken a film study class. So I feel like I'm out of my element as far as judging this film, and it's torn between how I enjoyed this movie versus its actual factual, like the cinematography, the acting, and the acting for the time for a silent film. But I did not enjoy this film, and I don't think that's a big shock to you, Michael.
I'm actually kind of floored by that. I thought that being a man of your ilk, that you would appreciate.
What does that mean?
Well, it's like a theater movie, really. It's the silent movie. There's a lot of theater elements in this. There's obviously a concentration on the set design, and then the embellishment and any silent era acting is going to be very stage. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, very much so.
And I figured that at least part of that would translate to something that you could appreciate. I mean, there's no doubt that it's dated in a movie from 1920, but
don't get me wrong. There is a lot about this movie I appreciated. In fact, watching this film gave me a lot of insight into Tim Burton's aesthetic. Like, clearly, all of his his style is pulled from this German expressionism, very much so. But that said, and as much as I like the kind of jaunty angles and everything else, I feel like the set was like kind of cheaply done. Like, it looked like kind of like crepe paper being painted on, like, kind of crudely.
Was pretty much exactly that, right? Like, it
they actually
was
did
very
save a
cheaply done.
lot of money on their stage design, which was kind of an innovative thing at the time, not just from an aesthetic point of view, but also my understanding is that this set was pretty cheap compared to, like, obviously filming on location or actually building like a film studio set. But it also, that's kind of like, it gives it's I don't know, it's one of its more identifiable characteristics of this film, and a lot of fans of this film would note it as a highlight.
I mean, after maybe 2 minutes of seeing Caligari on screen, I'm like, oh, so DeVito's Penguin is based completely off of this character in Batman Returns, right? I mean, like the resemblance is uncanny.
I would like say that there's a lot of modern influence in film today that's probably even like possibly like a degree of separation removed, but you know, people might have made films in the 60s, 70s, 80s that young filmmakers today grew up watching and loving, not even necessarily having seen this or knowing, and then are now in the middle of their careers or the beginning of their careers implementing things that, you know, owe their inception to, you know, really German surrealism and German expressionist era film. I mean, this is one of the heydays of film in a region that was putting out a lot of well-known, well-acclaimed film. I mean, I believe excuse me, I'm not a historian, so the dates, I believe 1918 to 1933 was the
World War I to World War II, right?
Well, I mean, that was kind of like in between.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
The end of World War I to the beginning of like the Nazi era.
Yeah, so the First Reich, I believe they called it the Weimar.
The Weimar Republic.
Weimar Republic, yeah. So this.
Or Weimar.
Yeah, that's if you're more correct. But this era of German art and specifically film is still looked at very fondly. I mean, you gotta think who else you're talking about. Fritz Lang and F.W. Marneau. We're talking some of the most important or at least influential and time-standing films of, you know, all time. We're talking Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, Nosferatu, Faust, Dr. Mabuse, Metropolis. I mean, really, we're talking about the heavy hitters of silent.
The foundations of film.
Right. And this one was one of the early ones, and it's one that stood out. I mean, some of the you guys might laugh at this, but like some of the stars in this movie did go on to have fairly like prolific careers. I think that Lil Dagover starred in over like 200 movies.
Great name.
Great name. You guys, do you know who Conrad Veidt is? What he's most famous for in cinema?
No.
He was in Casablanca.
Oh, you know what? I did actually see that. And I'm sure you have some notes on this, and we already kind of touched on like World War I and World War II and the break in between. But the fact that the German Expressionism was kind of the manifestation of the German psyche after the end of World War I, where they were basically set to pay back reparations. They'd lost the war, and this film didn't create Nazism, but it's a symptom of the time and that's why it's so surrealist and where everything's at like jaunty angles, because trying to kind of rationalize their place in the world with what they used to be. And there's a lot of like film study about how the somnambulist, what'd your name is, Cesare? I was calling him Caesar the whole time. I thought it was weird that there was a Caesar and a Caligari. I was like, that's pretty Italian, but okay. And there's stuff that we get into later with like the lost manuscript and everything.
Right.
But how the somnambulist was kind of a symbolic stand-in for the young men in World War I that were sent to go kill people by powerful men in places of authority, and they had no choice in the matter. They were kind of like sleepwalkers.
Yeah, well, I mean, art is always a product of its time, right? And I know it's hard 100 years later. I mean, it's 101 years later. But trying to put yourself into the mindset or framework of the time in order to digest this, I think perhaps isn't requisite to enjoy the film, because I do find the film to be enjoyable and something that holds up. Definitely silent film is not for everybody, but when it comes to the story, which is minimal and straightforward, as most silent films tend to have, but the acting and set design and stuff, like there are things that translate over. And like if you are really into production design or like art direction, then this film probably still has a lot that you can digest, but that might be for a more niche audience. However, I think to get the impact of this film, you do need to frame it, in the 1918 to 1933, in between World War I and World War II German mindset. And obviously that's going to be hard for us and most others, knowing what we know and living how we've lived. It couldn't be more different than that. But yeah, definitely. I think you get a lot of commentary, and this is not anything profound or unique to me. This, like I said, this movie's been out forever and has been dissected and talked about ad nauseum. So you can find books and documentaries and everything, but definitely this film makes note of, the youth in Germany, the young men, the oppressionist state, the power, the misleading government, and kind of, even down to the set design. A lot of people have commented is like, there's two different theories here of why everything is like at weird angles and wonky and not standing on stilts and stuff. One is that it is all being retold through the perspective of a madman, Francis, which makes sense because ultimately, and we'll get into it, but there is a twist ending where Francis is the one who is insane and he is ultimately the patient in the insane asylum. But also another idea is that this is reflective of the state of the world in Germany in 1920. It's at the end of one regime, not knowing what lies ahead. I mean, we're talking about pre-Nazi Germany, and I feel like a lot of American narratives are kind of like dismissive of the fact that even exists a lot of times. I don't know. That's a whole nother discussion, but 1920 Germany, wow, what a place. And I think that you can really feel the struggle and the longing for like an identity in its art scene at that time. And I think that that's a very present theme in Caligari. But I mean, I'm going to go down the rabbit hole on this
know.
one. I know you
we
all
expect
know.
it.
And I know I know.
All right. Part of why I actually don't enjoy this film
is anticipating that.
No. That's not that. And I'm not saying this is a bad film, but part of why I don't enjoy this film is because you need a lot of background knowledge to really appreciate it. And I feel that I'm not a cinephile, I'm just a dude who watches movies. I feel like a big part of why I enjoy film is because they are quote unquote timeless. You don't need this background information. The movie stands on its own, and silent film is so far removed. This is the first silent film I've watched ever. Besides maybe like the train going past, the very first filmography or whatever.
Have you seen Trip to the Moon? It's like 10 minutes.
No. I've seen the bullet going into the moon's eye, like that's
and the Smashing Pumpkins video.
Yeah, that's like literally
tonight, yeah.
So that's one of the digs I have against it. Another one is just, I feel like I could have watched this movie at 3 times the speed and lost very little.
That's silent film.
Even for a silent film, and actually after this, I read some reviews on multiple sites, people that quote unquote claim to love other like Metropolis, like Nosferatu, and many others that I did not recognize the titles of, and they were saying that this is particularly slow for what's going on, and that might have contributed to my my somnambulism during this film in the third act. But again, like I was like, man, waiting and waiting and waiting, and because I'm not familiar with silent film, the jump between screen and then the subtitles, or not subtitles, the text scenes where they're kind of slowly coming up in the sort of jaunty handwritten text, which was kind of cool for the first 20 minutes, and then after that I was like, Jesus, just get on with it.
That's kind of an anomaly in silent film up to this point, especially. And you guys also got to remember, this is like one of the first like feature-length films ever. Period. Full stop. Like we haven't been making movies very long up to this point.
Yeah, like 5 years before this, basically.
Right, and there haven't been a lot, but like I do prefer like a cleaner, more succinct title
like
card.
a better film.
No, title card, like
Title
in
card.
between the text cards. That's what they call
yeah.
those. I do prefer that, and this one was fun and gimmicky, but eventually it stops being fun and it just becomes gimmicky, just like the handwritten scrawls and stuff.
It does.
But that's a different matter entirely, really, from the film, that I'm not going to over critique, because there is so much fun stuff happening in this film, and and it does drag a little bit, for sure. But also, I mean, they're finding their footing in the terms of telling a story on film, period. But man, we'll get into some of the really cool things, but there were some absolutely revolutionary visual effects beyond the set design. But like, there was some cool, dare I say, even special effects. This is one of the movies that
I think back then they're just called effects, right?
Well, they were very special. But I mean, this is one of the first frame devices in film. This is one of the first twist endings in film. This is widely credited.
He loves those Irish shots, I'll tell you what.
Oh my gosh. This is widely considered one of the first horror films, or the first horror film. There is so much about this movie that had never been done before. It's truly revolutionary, and it's so easy to miss that, like, today. Like, I mean, I've seen
Again, you need
Avatar
the background knowledge. This is like reverse modern art, where people shit on modern art because, like, oh, anybody could have done that. I could have done that. Okay, but you didn't, and you couldn't, because you don't know why this is so revolutionary. And this is why I'm trying to balance my view on this film, because a lot of this comes down to what does this film influence. And I kind of looked at that a little bit, but I figured that you would have done the heavy lifting on this as far as like what this film influenced in the future. And without that knowledge, exactly that. But without specific bullet points, like, I feel like it's lost. It's like, oh, this is art history, this is film history, and that's all well and good, but it doesn't resonate with me unless I've got like, oh, this influenced such and such film. And the Tim Burton stuff I touched on earlier, I'm trying really hard. You actually ruined my scoring, like my scoring rubric completely with this film. Like, you derailed it completely.
Good.
So, also, thank you for picking this film. I want to say that. I'm not trying to be funny. Like, thank you for picking this film, because I've been meaning to watch this for a long time. And if I had put this on without any deadline or obligation, there's no way I would have finished it. Absolutely not. I would have turned this off 20 minutes in.
I mean, fair enough. And I will keep that in mind when I continue to subject you to more silent film masterpieces. And we got a whole section of Fritz Lang coming up that's going to just drop your trousers.
You are making it real hard to not be vindictive with my picks.
I have a feeling that you've already chosen such, and I am accepting of that. And you have to realize that this is a pick out of vindication. But you know what? I'm not trying to leave our man out of this conversation.
Yeah,
it doesn't
Bill,
help that you didn't watch
you
this
didn't watch
movie,
this film at all.
But why don't you jump in and tell us?
I mean, it was really good. The version that I watched looked like a guy holding two ink blots and just smashing them together for an hour. I learned very early before this recording that there were such versions that existed where you could actually tell what was going on and tell the characters apart. And I actually really do want to go back and watch that version. Like, I'm not kidding. Like, I was disappointed that I wasn't really going to have a lot to add to this, because I know a decent amount of the background that we've talked about. And I mean, just being one of the first like horror films, like I didn't think I was gonna like it, and I still don't think I would like the other version. But man, I know there's so much that I missed out on. I mean, I did really like the score, and I did really like the makeup and the set design, but I mean, I had to pause every 10, 15 seconds and jump back to the IMDb and try to figure out who was who. So it's really difficult to
That's
get
fair.
into it deeper than that.
Right.
Unfortunately.
When he went over the film at the very beginning, were you like
learned a
blown away?
lot.
You're
I
like, wait,
learned
what?
I learned a lot from that plot synopsis, to be honest with you.
Well, that's
I knew.
good.
Like,
I will say, if you've seen the movie Shutter Island, you've seen this film.
I do. I
This is
mean,
that Shutter Island is largely
that is
influenced
true.
by
Yeah,
this
that
movie.
makes a lot of sense. I have seen that, which it was okay. But yeah, I can see that now. But I mean, you said, I want to go back. You said at the beginning that it's set in stone that Francis was a mental patient. I kind of got the idea
That's the end.
Very
that it
end.
was ambiguous at the end, that you still weren't sure.
It's not spelled out, but but very much so. Also, I read that initially both the intro scene and the twist ending were not part of the original script, and that the writers were very much turned off by that it was
Yep.
added in.
They really didn't care for it.
And I think it's cool, but I would have been fine without it. I would have been fine without the twist ending. It might even been a better film. I don't know. Again, because it was like one of the first and all that, you have all this fucking bullshit you got to like, kind of sift through of like whether that's actually a good concept or an attribute versus what people have been saying about this film for literally a century.
Literally.
I do agree that the editing required to make that twist happen definitely made it, as a silent film, more confusing to follow. And I'm sure the version you guys watch it wasn't as confusing, but it's still some of that get lost. I do agree that, though, like, being one of the first twist endings is very cool, I think it would have been better for the film if it was just
Can you imagine
straight
a
It would have been a
bunch of-
completely different film.
Bunch
though.
of flapper girls getting mind fucked by this movie.
Oof.
I mean, that's like ostensibly what happened, really. I mean, it might not have gone down exactly in that verbiage, but
I think so.
you think of the time and you think of the effect and the impact this movie had. I mean, there's not international distribution really occurring at this point in time.
However, apparently after World War I, a lot of German films were edited or were not accepted by, quote unquote, they weren't allies back then. I don't know what the Entente or whatever the good guys were. Good guys, quotes. And that this is one of the films that was coming out of Germany at the time that is extremely German, and it doesn't really, I mean, they say it takes place in Germany, but you can tell that just by watching the film, and was a major boon to film from Germany at the time as being kind of well regarded. Just a little aside there.
Have you ever seen a silent film prior to this?
No, I think this from beginning. I think I tried to watch The Artist, because I was at that point where I wanted to watch all the movies nominated for an Oscar, and I don't think I finished it. Probably because it was
Why do you think that was? Yeah, exactly.
The Artist is like a 2012
Yeah,
silent
that's
film
a
or something.
newer
That's true.
Yeah, I haven't
one.
seen that.
Still a
but
silent film, though.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
guess, but I mean, it's a different
You
art.
guess?
No, I'm okay. Like that is true, but like
it's a silent.
This
It
is a-
chooses to be a
this-
silent film.
entire era. Yeah, this
So it's better.
this entire era
Strikes into the
of
pitfalls.
film to me is just, it is a completely different art form.
Okay, I'll be totally honest that I understand that there's a wealth of knowledge needed to really appreciate this film for most people, not everybody, but for me. But when I see that this is a top 5 in horror movie fans, they're like, "Oh, what's your top 5 or your top 10?" And they list this movie in here. You might as well have been like, "Oh, what are your favorite songs?" Like, "Oh, I love Mary Had a Little Lamb on Wax Cylinder by Thomas Edison." Like, fuck you. Like, you're full of shit. You pretentious piece of shit. Fuck you. It's not that good.
I mean, to be clear, I've never made those claims, and I'm not
I'm
saying
not-
that you did.
I'm
but
looking
for
at you, I'm
listeners,
not talking about you.
No, I know you're making. Not that anybody can see this, but you're making strong eye contact and talking firmly to me. And I realize it's because it works better if you have an audience.
It does.
But also, I would not say that this is. This is in my notes. This is not my favorite horror film. This is not my favorite silent film. This is not my favorite silent horror film. It's actually probably not even my top 3 favorite silent horror films.
What's your top 3 silent favorite horror films?
And number 1, with a bullet, Lon Chaney, Phantom of the Opera,
Okay.
1925.
I'm not familiar with Lon Chaney.
Unquestionable.
Yeah.
I mean,
of
you know
course.
who Lon Chaney is. You're
Yeah.
joking, right?
No, I thought you meant the film was titled
Oh,
Lon
no.
Chaney. I was like, wait, what?
I don't know what number 2 and number 3 are per se, but it is either or. And these are interchangeable, but number 1 with a bullet is Phantom of the Opera. And then I would say, there might be 3 in there. Okay, so whatever. Put these next 3 in any order.
Mm-hmm.
Haxan,
Mm-hmm.
Faust,
Mm-hmm.
Nosferatu.
Mm-hmm.
Those would be the next ones. And then Cabinet is probably somewhere in the mix lower than that. I don't know. Man, have you ever seen... No, you haven't seen.
No, this is the first one we've seen.
Mr. Wu. Mr. Wu is another good Lon Chaney silent movie that I enjoy. I got really into silent film in high school and have watched quite a bit. Oh, Dr. Mabuse is one of the first depictions of like the aristocrat, intelligent, suave villain. Like, he's a doctor.
Patrick Bateman.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, Patrick Bateman definitely pulls a lot from Dr. Mabuse. Mabuse the Gambler. I mean, that's, I think, a 3-part series from Fritz Lang, and I think that there was even a talkie that he did in, like, the 60s. He revived these series. But anyway, yeah, this movie is good. I really enjoy it. I love the lore behind it. I love... there's some scenes to me that are like so iconic, and obviously I have like a deep-seated nostalgia for a lot of this, and a lot of it was when I saw it with who I saw it and like my state of mind going into it. But like, man, and I wish you would have saw this in like, HD because it's so much better. But when Caligari first opens the cabinet at the fair,
Which is a coffin. Well, I don't know why they call it a cabinet. It's a coffin.
yeah, sure,
And he's sleeping standing up? What is this shit?
he's a somnambulist. He's not just.
He's been asleep for 23 years, but none of his muscles have atrophied? What is this shit?
I'm watching this movie and hearing you scream in the
I
deafening
know, and
silence
you
of this
heard
movie,
you
I was
heard my
hearing-
voice.
No, I did.
Fuck you!
Yes. Yeah, like, how's he eating? Where is he poop? Like, all these questions are that of a 4-year-old, which you entered this movie with the mindset of, and I appreciate that. But if you could gloss over these, these glaring plot holes, then you can get a lot from it. And what I was going to say is, when that cabinet opens, when the coffin opens, and you first are introduced to Cesare, and you see that makeup, and he is just sitting there in all of his sepia glory.
Standing.
God damn it. It is such a good scene. Another scene that's great is when Jane goes to confront Dr. Caligari and Cesare, and he's like slowly descending into madness, and his smile is peeking through, and like, you probably couldn't see any of this in the version that you watch, but the subtle facial expressions, like, okay, can we talk about Werner Cross? That Nazi piece of shit, real quick, Nazi piece of shit. But he fucking did a great job in this movie.
I mean, it looks like Danny DeVito's Penguin with Mickey Mouse gloves. And again, I think a lot of this is silent film because some of, like you're saying, stage
All of
play.
it is, yeah.
Wait, good one. Good point, Bill. Thanks for that.
I'm still here.
I'm still here. A lot of it is like his kind of like shaky, like overacting kind of with the cane and stuff.
That's good.
Well, I don't know if it's good,
It's
but
goddamn
it's
great.
spectacle. And then obviously the Cesare, however you want to pronounce his name,
Correctly.
The makeup on him. I mean, I got like initially seeing him. Okay, this is Edward Scissorhands. This is The Crow. Like, this is like the goth aesthetic.
Oh,
from this. He's the seed that kind of started this up, along with like kind of Victorian dress and like all that other kind of bullshit.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that you even say that you wish I saw that in 4K, because one of the few positive things that I was able to make before realizing what version I was watching was really how creepy it was. So I bet it looks cooler like when you see him in 4K, but like in that shitty whatever, like it did look scary. Like it was more nightmarish in the version that I saw, which did like there was sometimes it was unsettling, which I enjoyed. Like even Dr. Caligari and his facial movements and stuff, when you can't really tell what he's doing or anything, it was creepy, and that was one of my favorite things about the version that I watch is that it did kind of creep me out a little bit.
Okay, I speaking of plot holes, this guy gets a permit to the carnival or the fair or whatever and claims to have a sleepwalker that he keeps in a cabinet. This guy, I think I wrote, laziest carny in all of existence, because clearly he just paid some like poor gay man to like dress up in drag and makeup and hide in a cabinet and pretend to be asleep for the last 23 years when he isn't, because he can walk around and talk.
Yeah, but I mean, people were dumb.
And Dead by Dawn. Dead by Dawn! Dead by Dawn! Very Evil Dead. Love that little bit.
Yeah, well, I mean, they took that. Or,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
I mean,
because it was the first film ever made, so of
much,
course, like
yeah.
everyone's seen it.
Did you get? We brought this up already when you were gone. Did you get?
Oh, when I was shitting?
Cesare, did you get Mac as Nightman vibes?
Oh no!
Because that's the very first thing
But-
when it showed his eyes. I was like, oh, it looks like the Nightman.
He's definitely going for gasps. Yeah, I agree. No, I did not make that connection, but I think now that you say that this definitely heavily influenced Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
That's why I'm here to make those connections.
No, but but really though, I'm pretty confident that you're not being a smartass. But if you look at the
We
set
looked it
design
up.
from the Nightman Cometh musical,
A little bit.
it is all wonky and
In
weird
the fact that it was painted by children on crepe paper.
well,
No,
yeah, but that's a intelligent cast of writers and
Oh, Charlie Day and Mac, or not Mac, Rob
Glenn
McElhaney.
Howerton and Rob Mac-
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
all of them.
very intelligent.
Yeah, and they're pulling. You know,
That's what I'm saying.
deep
Like,
cuts.
I would not be surprised if it was completely on
Glenn,
purpose.
Rob, Charlie, if you're listening,
If you guys are Elmers,
Big fans.
go ahead and slide into my DMs. Let me know if this film influenced you and your creation of the Nightman Cometh.
another one is when they put the kind of red herring attempted murderer who looks sort of like a young Sean Connery a little bit.
Kind of.
They put him in jail, or right? It's a prison cell.
Yeah.
You didn't, because you didn't watch this film.
I did.
Did you get vibes of Midsummer at the very end in like the Triangle Chapel kind of? It might just be that it's like a weird angular set, but I definitely got some kind of vibes of that.
Dude, so this, I didn't get that at the time, but I'm not shocked that you found something there. And now that I'm trying to think of it, like, yeah, there's bits of that. There's also when Cesare is sneaking into Jan's house while she's
Jane
sleeping.
or Jan?
Jane, sorry, Jane's house while she's sleeping, and they have that like forward.
It's a lot of forced perspective.
Yeah,
this
like,
whole film.
That forward forced perspective, also like one of the first times. And I know that's silly because you keep saying that, but it's like this is one of those films that had such interesting cinematography given like the parameters of what they were doing. But yeah, I mean, and I was reading some reviews and just listening to some things that were saying like, oh, this is one of the most influential scenes for Citizen Kane. Like, and then they're doing a side by side of, you know, shots in Citizen Kane where they were using that same framing and forced perspective.
When was Citizen Kane released?
1941. Let's take a look. But yeah, I don't know if you guys want to keep it rolling while I look this up.
Yeah, no, I mean,
1941. Bam! Sometimes I'm fucking
bam!
good.
I did
Sometimes I'm fucking good.
love the two-tiered stools that the policemen are on. Like I love the
like
the high chairs, the high tables, just a lot of it.
Well, it's elevating like the government. It's elevating the bureaucracy. It is putting the
I think
people,
that's a stretch.
the common people. This is what they had. This is how silent film is
Again, and
made.
it's been a whole century of people to jack themselves off about how great this film is and how influential it is, which it is. But again, like
He's
death
in a fucking cabinet.
death of the author, right? Like once this film has been put out into the ether, like people will draw their own conclusions from this, and because every filmmaker since then, because this film was one of the first full-length feature films, they've of course drawn from this because whatever, fucking.
Isn't that art though? Like, sure, you have artist interpretation, but also is it not the like? Isn't there an element of voyeurism here?
I mean, of course there is. There
Okay,
always is. But
So, I mean, if it's relevant enough to the commentary 100 years fucking later, then you
Right.
can't discredit it.
you can, because your feelings are true, but they don't. Or your feelings are real. That doesn't mean they're true. You know what I'm saying?
I would disagree with that in terms of art.
Okay.
It makes me feel a certain way.
It makes me feel a very certain way too.
And that's
Sleepy.
your truth. You just live your best life and you seek out your truth, and I'm not going to stop you from doing that.
Sometimes it feels that way.
It is kind of apropos that you fell asleep during the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari.
Isn't it funny? It's like it's very apropos. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Cesare, he's locked in a cabinet. He is under the control of the evil Caligari.
Which is a weird kind of like, were people afraid of sleepwalkers in the 20s?
No, it's a fucking metaphor, as we've already talked about. But you know what I
Apparently not
mean?
because they showed up to ask him questions and shit.
Yeah, that is weird, right?
Yeah.
He's like a prophet or like
he's
like
also all-knowing.
a psychic of sorts.
You know how fucking stupid people were, like pre-scientific discovery of the internet?
Not
and shit
stupid.
like
They were
that?
just ignorant. There's a difference.
Yeah, that is very true. They're in fact much more formally educated in this era.
Right,
than we are today.
like some of us are like very well educated and still very ignorant.
Why
So
are you looking at me?
no reason.
All right.
This
So let's
movie had no tits, by the way.
Did you like the absence of memories, or did you like or hate? I don't know if you saw this bit in the version you watched, but the sort of text overlay when
Oh my God.
Caligari is like going crazy, or before the director, who is never named, decides to become Caligari.
So, which actually didn't happen either.
Well,
I mean-
it did in the original script.
Sure. But
Because this wasn't a stupid Shutter Island idea until, I don't know, they rewrote it.
okay, so there's a couple things I wanted to talk about, and this was
Just
one
a
of them.
couple? You get two.
And then, okay, so the second one I was going to talk about is the other rather innovative effect that takes place when Cesare or whoever, the unknown assailant at the time, is murdering Alan, which was the shadow animation.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh, I know you guys are going to shit all over me geeking out about this, but how fucking cool is that in 1920? Like, this is, I think this is like a year after the first animated feature film, which was ultimately lost, but like it definitely, the first remaining animated feature film was 1926. Another German expressionist film called The Adventures of Prince Ahmed, which is another great silent film that
Is it great?
Dude, it's so much fun. Yeah, it's all silhouette, shadow projection, like fucking animation. It's so cool, and like the work that went into making all of this is so awesome.
Okay.
But this precedes that by 6 years, and yeah, it was only like a small like scene, but like what an innovative way to portray your antagonist off screen while still depicting an act of violence and still having those terrifying visual effects for the viewer. I mean, this had never been seen before.
It never been seen before. Never been seen before. That's crazy. It's almost like when humans were first standing upright and like cooking their meat, and someone added salt. It's like, oh my god, this is amazing. Like, how come no one's ever done this before?
I just watch you pound salty meat in my kitchen for an hour and a half prior to this recording, and I'll tell you what, that innovation still kicks ass today.
Still kicks ass.
Okay, and you know
Watch
what?
me eat meat on Insta.
Yeah, hashtag Bill eats meat.
I'm not Bill.
Well, no, I know you're feeding, but anyway.
It's behind a paywall.
So anyway, yeah, you can shit on all you want. So cool. And then the second thing I was going to talk about was, yes, the superimposed text floating in the air and on the walls. And how good was Werner
Was
Krauss
it,
again in this
I
scene
do
when
re-
he's like looking around?
I
He has-
do remember that,
he has
actually.
a
I
Dust
do remember
Werner
that.
Caligari.
Yeah,
Yeah, dude.
I do remember that.
That was so cool.
I liked it. I actually expected this to be in like black and white, like black and white.
Oh, it was.
Most silent films,
Which for some of us it was.
tell ya.
most
Yeah.
silent films were died on
But,
the actual film
but-
reels
but-
themselves were died.
But sepia, right? So it's like a reddish brown yellow kind of
How
during the day.
Fucking cool was
and
that
then like
too?
kind of a green blue
Blue at
slate
night.
sort of at night, which was nice. And then sort of the weird green for the text that they had.
and then like the
handwritten
pink inside
and
of
stuff.
Jane's house and stuff.
Yes,
like,
I forgot about that. Where she like looks like a prostitute because it's all like red light all over.
Rose-tinted
Yeah, and a lot of
glasses,
like, well, sepia tinted glasses, but yeah.
Right.
But I don't know. This film, when I was rewatching the third act, the fourth act today, I was trying to leave my bias at the door, as I should, and I felt like this film was almost like watching like
paint dry. You hated
No, not like that.
I
It was
wish
like
it was
it was
that
like
good.
watching like a marionette play, something that's kind of an outdated, not a bad media, but like something that I'm so far removed from that my usual critiques don't really apply, and I need to readjust and recalibrate to be fair to the film, which is stupid because the film should stand on its own. It should be enjoyable on its own. It shouldn't matter if it's 100 years old, if it's a timeless masterpiece. But it isn't, and it is. So
Well, if you're interested, I'll send you home with a box full of silent films, and you can do
I
your
am
homework.
not interested.
Okay.
I would rather that you force me to watch them by your obligated picks, and then I will give them proper shrift. But without that, this is not a genre film that I enjoy. If later in my life I decide to take a film study class at community college, then
You'll refer them to the pod. Check
then
out.
I'll be like, hey, I already
Hashtag
watched this
13th
film.
Elm
This is like
podcast.
20 years ago.
I didn't get to watch this in my film class. I kind of wish I did
When did you take a film class?
in college.
When?
I don't know. You want the exact semester dates?
Yeah,
I don't
the-
fucking
the-
remember
the-
the summer of 2016.
Okay. So
It was
recent.
when I was just finishing up. Yeah, I was
Was it an
en
elective?
route. Yeah,
Okay.
it was. So
What did you watch?
All the other ones that you would guess: Casablanca, the one with the where they say the words at the end and it means something, and the other one.
The what?
You know
the
what
ones
exactly?
where they say
you
the
know
ones at the end.
Exactly what I'm talking about.
I know which one you're talking about.
But I can't even though we talked about it on this podcast.
The snow globe.
Yes.
Fuck.
We talked about it
I'm
10 minutes
lost.
ago.
What are we talking about?
You talked about it 2 minutes ago. The other one. What
The
is
one
other
where they
one?
put the
Other
words at
one.
the... Is it a silent film?
It's the snow
No.
globe.
No,
at
'cause
the
you haven't
very
watched it.
end.
And it's the
Casablanca.
Elmer's are screaming at us right
Casablanca.
now. No,
it's
that's
when
the
you-
other one.
It's like where you find out the point of it as he's dying and he drops the snow globe in the chair.
Yeah. I've never seen this film.
Citizen
but
Kane.
Yes,
Citizen
Citizen
Kane.
Kane.
That one. The shitty one.
The other one.
Citizen Kane's great.
Very memorable.
Orson
It
obviously.
Welles.
was so memorable.
Well, I love that my picks went over. And, I want you guys to really dig into this and tell me how you feel because it's unclear to me at this point. We got one person who didn't watch the movie, one
I
person
just-
who fell asleep.
I finished it.
Can I
did-
interject right there? Because
No.
to me, it sounds like I'm the only one that watched the movie. You watched, these people these days, they can't handle how a movie was originally filmed. They have to have it remastered and recolored. I watched this film as it is supposed to be. I'm the only one that saw this film.
Well, how mu-
maybe
did
you
you
are,
finish
It was
it?
boring.
But
Did you
this
finish
week-
it though?
Yes.
Did you?
Yes.
Okay.
I've seen this movie probably now about 5 or 6 times, and I've
Christ.
definitely seen it both in HD and on like shitty VHS rips from the fucking AMC television like programs that like were recorded by my uncle and shit. Oh yeah.
Yeah. To bounce back off something you said at the previous episode, I think I would have enjoyed this film more as a graphic novel because it would have been about 6 pages long, and it would have taken 10 seconds to read it, and I would have been fine with that.
So the set design was very distorted and unconventional, and everything was like out of proportion and ambiguous, which I felt had like added element to the confusion and discombobulation that seems to be the theme of the movie. Obviously, we are dealing with a madman in Francis that we spoke about. The lines between reality and the unknown are almost non-existent in this film, especially through the lens of the viewer in 1920 when you have never seen floating text
Never
on
seen a film
screen and
before.
stuff. Never seen a film. Oh, you have to understand this is
That probably
very
fucked
possibly
people
like
up, honestly.
the first movie that many people ever
Mm-hmm.
saw, which is fucking sick. I know you guys disagree with that, but that's fine. The whole idea of dyeing the film to depict light and day when you don't really have a lot of other medium to, tell that story. I mean, it's fun and it's innovative, and it did lend itself to many of the films that would come out immediately after. But even still today, as we talked about, like you get a lot of Tim Burton.
Major
Just
Tim
the
Burton.
aesthetic in this film has influenced so much, and this film wasn't necessarily unique in that. Like I said, we're talking about the 1920s and 30s expressionist German art scene, German film scene, and it was prolific. And there's many other examples of this, but this is perhaps the most well-known and definitely, I would say, the most like studied, not just because of the art, but because of its social narratives of the war. And that takes me into another fun point, or maybe fun is not the word, but we did mention earlier that Conrad Veidt was in Casablanca. Now, he married a Jewish woman in the late 20s and fled Germany in the early 30s, fearing the rise of the Nazi regime. He married a Jewish woman, came to America, and then he revitalized his film career playing the role of Major Strasser in Casablanca. Have either of you seen Casablanca?
No.
Man,
Yeah.
it's a great film. You watched it in film study class, right?
Yep.
Yeah. That's a great story. And you don't even necessarily have to watch the film. There's lots of ways to get that story out there. One of the first way that I was ever exposed to Casablanca, I went to I had some buddies who were in like they called it like radio read theater, and they just would read like the radio script. There was like no real acting, but they would change like the scenes behind, like the set behind them, and they would sit and read from paper of like the radio transcript of the story. I don't know.
Riveting.
Yeah, it was awesome, man. It was really cool. But yeah, so he plays Major Strasser, who is a Nazi, and it's funny because immediately in juxtaposition to that, I did refer earlier to Werner Krauss as a Nazi piece of shit, which he was. I don't know if you guys got into this part of his story, but this is Dr. Caligari, who was a prolific actor as well, and he would stay in Germany, and he made many propaganda films for the Nazi Party, working directly with Adolf Hitler and Joseph Goebbels. He was actually named the cultural ambassador for the Nazi Party by Hitler.
Did he work
damn, I didn't know
on, what's the famous one, Birth of a Nation?
No, he did not work on that one, because I think that is actually an American film.
Maybe that is an American film.
But he did portray Rabbi Lowe, the central antagonist in the film Jud Sus, or Sus the Jew, which is like one of the most
The
anti-Semitic.
Jew is sus.
Yeah,
Yeah.
one of the most anti-Semitic, like well-known and documented and influential Nazi propaganda movies of all time. And it's funny that he portrayed a Jew. It's kind of like the flip-flop from Conrad Veidt and how their careers would
Right.
go on. Just a little fun fact. I mean, this movie is full of the narrative of dictatorship, and a lot of people have talked about that since, death of the author and everything. And like I said, you can check all this stuff out from people who are much more educated than me and have a much more eloquent way of describing it. It's available on YouTube. You can order books on Amazon. Shout out to Jeff Bezos. Kill yourself. Boop, boop.
Jason Bezos.
Kill yourself. Yeah. So I don't know. There's a lot of this movie to get into that we're not going to touch on, but overall, I think that we've surmised this plot and we've kind of talked as much as maybe we want to talk about it.
Maybe more.
Yeah, I kind of get in that vibe as well. So what I'll say is I do love this movie. It is a time capsule experiment. It's fun in the sense that it's trailblazing. As I mentioned, not my favorite horror movie, not my favorite silent movie. But it might be the most important and most influential of both of those genres. You know what I mean? And obviously, there's big landmarks along the way. But for the first 20, 30, 40, 50 years of film, I mean, shit. This is up to Rosemary's Baby, one of the most influential. Because, I mean, you have the Universal monsters, but that's kind of like nothing new. A lot of that was borrowed from different source material and just adapted to screen. And obviously, Rosemary's Baby was based on Ira Levin's novel as well. But as something that stands out as uniquely film and cinema, this one, fuck, man, it's a heavy hitter. I do really actually enjoy this movie. Being just over an hour long, I can watch this quite a bit and not tire of it. I feel like there's always something new to take, and I give it an 85. I really like this movie. Woo.
Wow.
I just want to say, if you do want to watch this movie, just make sure you are right. You are watching one of the newer, updated versions of it, so you can tell what is going on.
It's available on Shudder in 4K, I believe.
Yes, watch it on Shudder. Don't do as I did, but I mean, like I said, I can really appreciate films like this. Like, I can't say it's a bad film, but like the ratings are supposed to go off enjoyment, right? Like, I can appreciate all of the things that it did for film and for horror and all that, but it is not entertaining to me whatsoever, and I'm sure the version that I can tell what's going on would be better, but I'm rating it off of what I watch, and to do that I would have to get it a 6 out of 100.
That's honestly more generous than I was expecting from you.
Yeah. Holy shit.
A 6 out of 100?
Yeah.
Oh, out of 100?
Yes.
Oh.
That sounds about right.
Okay, so they
a 6 out of 1 fucking 100.
let me are you not understanding?
I
understand.
heard you.
I just
I heard you.
misheard you though. and I
Every
am
single character looked the exact same, and what I could not tell what was going on without the aid of
No,
IMDb and
you're
YouTube
right.
videos.
I heard 6
unfortunately,
and I thought 6 out of 10. That's what I heard.
So did I. I was like, fuck, you were downplaying that, but you gave it some love.
from what I did see of like the updated version, it would probably rate it somewhere in the 20s or 30s. But from what I saw, I have to give it a 6 out of 100.
That's fair.
That's fair. Like I said earlier, this completely wrecked my scoring rubric completely because I
Did
have
you give it a pass-fail?
I have no context of most of this. There were some cool shots, and a lot of this goes back to just the history of film and like what this is influenced on. And initially, I didn't have a score for it. I didn't know what to score this. I was just going to give it a 5 out of 10 because I had no other way of putting it in context. And then I started thinking about it more, and then finished the film that I slept through the ending of, and through enjoyment, which is not usually how I score things, is a 1 out of 10. Because I did not enjoy this film at all. If I could put a word to this film, arduous comes to mind. In that it felt, you said homework, and homework
it's a chore.
is definitely the qualifier. So if I could average them out, 1 out of 5 or 1 out of 10, and a 5 out of 10 comes to a 3, which sounds a little strong, to be honest. So we'll say a weak 3 out of 10. For Rob.
Well, I do appreciate your willingness and the studiousness. No, that's not the word.
That's a word.
It's not the word I'm looking for. But I appreciate your commitment to making it through this in the name of the pod. And the Elmers appreciate it. It says one of the most anticipated episodes that we've posted about. You wouldn't believe the amount of mail I was getting in this.
I think I would believe the amount of mail you were getting.
I mean, I had to open up. I actually had to open a second email account because my gigs are maxed.
Yeah, P.O. box is full.
Too many gigs.
Getting a lot of snail mail from people from 100 years ago.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching my movie.
Well, it's in German, so. Dankeschön.
Those forever stamps were a hell of an investment.
No shit, right? All in that sepia yellow.
Man, you know, Rob, I was hoping that I was going to get a sneaker out of you and that you would have been like, you know, I thought I was going to hate it. I've never seen a silent film. I did fucking hate it, but I appreciated it for what it was. And I think I kind of got that from you with a little bit more transparency that, like, you're maybe apprehensive to say that because you need to broaden your understanding of the medium as versus, you know, a more modern stuff. Yeah, there are a lot of caveats, but I think that I got more than I could have asked for. And I do appreciate you guys suffering through it, if that's how you viewed it, suffering through it to come and talk about it tonight because, fuck, it was good to revisit. It always feels good to revisit in Halloween time. And again, I'm renaming the month of October Halloween. Elmer's hashtag October is Halloween.
Hashtag Halloween. Yeah. No, again, thank you for picking this film because there's no way I would have finished it without an obligation.
And I'm genuinely upset that I did not watch the correct version, and I do mean it that I will get back to it, and I'll do it sometime within the next few years.
Decade.
Within the next decade.
You waited 100 years. That's another 100.
Did he really wait 100 years if he was born in 92?
Well, is anybody ever really born?
93.
Yes. Yes, they
Yes.
are. Anyway, speaking of picking films, what is the film that you're going to pick for next week, Rob? Talking about vindictive picks, I've been committed to hating whatever the fuck was going to come out of your mouth.
Oh, I hope you do.
Fright Night 2.
Oh my God! Please not Fright Night.
Friday
2.
Night 2. No, it's definitely not Friday Night 2. I thought that I would swing the pendulum in the opposite direction, where we have
Watch a good movie.
Watch a good movie. Watch a movie that is a fairly recent film. Watch a movie that might even be considered a modern classic. Maybe it's not been out long enough to be considered a modern classic, but I've only seen this film once. I saw it in the theaters. I've been meaning to rewatch it for a long time. I've been putting it off so I could forget as much as possible about it. The movie for next week is Robert Eggers' seminal or debut film, 2015, The Witch.
Fuck yeah.
It is available on Canopy with a K, which is a free streaming service. All you need to sign up for that is a public library card. So please support your public library. You might be a reader, but you're definitely a movie watcher of some sort if you listen to our garbage podcast. And it's free to get a library card, and then you can sign up through the app through your smart TV or mobile device or laptop, whatever. So I'm looking forward to it. I feel like it has a lot of strong elements, both in cinematography and acting, and it's kind of an art house film. Not near as much as this is, but it's not something I would just recommend to anybody, or even just a horror fan that I didn't know. So I look forward to a discussion about it.
I'm looking forward to it. I think that'll be good, and it is a bit of a change of pace.
Have you seen it?
I have seen it, and I do love Robert Eggers, and I'm not gonna try to give away too much for next week, but like I'm excited to dive deep into that one.
Anya Taylor-Joy.
She's
So good.
really good in this film, but we'll talk about that next week. We thank you for tuning in tonight, Elmers,
Thank you.
Thank you.
and let's do it again. We had fun. We know you had fun. You're gonna get washed away in the sweet sounds of sensual Rob, Sweet Bill, and loving Michael.
Don't like that.
Well, you're gonna learn to
Stay in
love.
it.
I like Sweet Bill. Sweet Bill's good. That's a good handle.
He
Hashtag
is
Sweet Bill.
Bill.
He's so sweet too. If you guys could see what I'm looking at right now,
It's
you wouldn't. Yeah, well, fuck me. Put that behind a paywall, and you can take my crypto today.
Take my crypto.
Take my crypto.
Good night, Elmers.
Take my crypto.
Good night, Elmers.
Good night, Jeff Bezos.
Pull up with us, watch 2 films. Come on, watch 2 films. If you scared, don't come over here. 13th Elm.